Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our introductory session on research-based assessment instruments. Chris, are you sharing screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm just not seeing it, so.
Oh.
Oh, there it is. Okay, now I can see it. Okay, so the plan for this series is to be basically throughout the coming academic year to focus each session on either a particular instrument or a group of related instruments. And for these sessions, we will be either bringing in a person who was instrumental in developing those instruments to tell us about them and how they can be used, or somebody who's researched these instruments and can give us some insight into what they do measure, what they don't measure, and how to choose amongst related instruments. So that's basically the plan for our series. Chris, next slide. So our schedule for upcoming events in optics, on September 12th, there's a quantum workshop, which is on September 12th. On the 26th will be our second session in this series on mechanics assessments. On September 27th, there'll be an AI grading workshop. And on the 24th of October, our third session on the RBAIs on survey of electricity and magnetism. So that's the plan coming up. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to start with a quick review of where to find RBAIs on PhysPort. And then we're going to have a presentation by our facilitator today, Jason Nissen. Afterwards, we'll have some time for questions and discussion, and of course, the ever necessary evaluation. So we're going to start with looking very briefly at PhysPort. And I'm going to do this very quickly, just to show you where you can find this. Chris, I believe there's one more slide.
Apologies.
No problem. Yeah, so what we're going to look at is how to find RBAIs through PhysPort, and then Jason will give us some other options as well. The URL there for PhysPort is at the top of the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and take us there. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Get there, share this, share. Okay, can everybody see that?
Nope.
No? Oh dear.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, yes.
Now, yes. Okay. So this is, I've already logged in to PhysPort, and on the home screen, you'll see right at the top in the middle is assessments. And if you want to find an assessment, we're going to go ahead and click on that. Just to let you know, there are places where you can input data and analyze assessment results. We will look at some of that in a later session. But for now, let's look at just how do you find these assessments? So clicking on assessments, and here they are. And it's a really nice little application. Basically, you can search by subject or level, anywhere from undergraduate, middle school, all the way up to graduate school. And you can search by content, by the format of the assessment, and the research validation. And I want to talk very briefly about the research validation. Each of these instruments is a research-based assessment instrument. All right, but they have different levels of validation. And what the heck does that mean? Well, let me go ahead and, show you what gold star validated means. All right, gold star validation basically means that it's been based on research into student thinking, and it's studied using interviews, expert review and statistical analysis. And the research was conducted at multiple institutions by multiple research groups, and it's been peer reviewed. So this is the highest level of research validation. All right. If you look at silver validation, all right, silver validation. Let me grab one that's silver validated just so you can see what that means. Oops. Oops, I clicked on the wrong thing. I apologize. There we go. It has some of those validations level, but not all of them. Okay. And the bronze, and let me find one that's bronze. Most of these are at least silver or gold, but there are a few bronze ones, and I'm not going to be able to find one when I want one. But basically, it just is another level.
Jerry, the LPCI they list as bronze.
Pardon?
LPCI, lunar phases concept inventory. It doesn't really qualify if they had listed as bronze.
I missed it on the list.
You can also search. Yeah.
Just type in LPCI.
LPCI. Okay.
It's an astronomy assessment, but
LPCI. Okay, there you go. And you can see it has even less of these checks.
I will comment that these are incorrect statements for this. Student interviews, expert review, appropriate statistical analysis, student thinking at multiple institutions by multiple research groups.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
now that I know about this, I can write a letter and say, hey, by the way, here's this evidence. Please reevaluate me.
Right. So basically, I wanted to go through that just so that you could see, maybe your particular institution, it says, sure, you can use some assessments with your classes, but we want to make sure that they're the highest possible level of validation on those instruments. So this gives you a way to search for them. Okay, so that's what the first thing we wanted to show you, just to give you an idea of where you can find these assessments that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next 2 semesters. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and stop sharing. And I'm going to introduce our speaker as soon as I can get this out of my way. Stop sharing. There it is. Okay, so our facilitator for today, for the rest of the session, is Dr. Jason Nissen. Dr. Nissen is an assistant professor in the physics department at Montana State University. Dr. Nissen is the co-director of the Learning Assistant Alliance's LASSO platform, which supports STEM instructors assessing the efficacy of their courses for free. Dr. Nissen served on the Leadership Council of the Learning Assistants Alliance and has taught with learning assistants at Oregon State University and the University of Maine. Dr. Nissen uses quantitative methods and a critical framework to investigate racism, sexism, and classism in college science courses through the analysis of large data sets. This work includes a focus on the efficacy and impacts of the learning assistant model nationally. His work also includes supporting students in developing teamwork skills, developing a new generation of formative assessments that meets instructors and researchers' needs, and supporting instructors using evidence-based instructional strategies for his course. And he will also be talking to us about the LASSO platform, which gives access to 83 research-based assessments. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason. Thank you so much for coming today.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. I have some stuff I'll talk about with SOTL, and then I'll go into LASSO and leave plenty of time for chatting. So this is like a talk we give to different groups of folks kind of about LASSO that Ben Van Dusen, who is the director of the LASSO platform with me, and I have developed over time, particularly if anybody's been to a Learning Assistant Alliance International Conference, you might have taken part in some of the workshops we do there. And let's see. There we go. So just as a waterfall activity, I wanted to start with in the chat, how is teaching similar to and different from doing science? So like put a similarity and a difference in the chat. Don't hit return yet. We'll take like 1 or 2 minutes until everybody indicates they've written something, and then we'll all hit return at the same time, and then we can read and discuss them. And I have to find the chat. There we go. How about we take another 30 seconds? Great. Yeah, let's just start hitting return and see what everyone says. Similar, they're interactive. They're experimental. I can collect data to see how well things go. I wrote that, which just aligns with why we're all here. Each class is a unique situation, right? It's really difficult. Even from if you teach the same material 3 times in a day, it'll be different each time. What other themes do people see? Research is more open-ended, teaching is more specific goals. It's similar in that there's trial and error, right? Like we're like learning, it's a learning process, right? We wouldn't be pushing our boundaries of scientific knowledge if we already knew the answers. And for me, it definitely feels like every day I'm learning something new about my students and their ideas. Great. So one of the ways that we've been thinking about this is through a lens of scholarship of teaching and learning. And part of that just comes from our work with the Learning Assistant Alliance, where we're really trying to help instructors become reflective on their teaching. And so we've worked on helping folks engage in scholarship of teaching and learning, which is really a reflective practice. And I'll just go through this pretty quickly so that I can focus on LASSO and kind of align with the goals. And so some of the reasons we want to engage in SOTL is just this reflective practice to maximize the impact of our teaching. Like we all said, collecting data to show how effective it is. I think in my own case, like I'm teaching and using like standards-based grading and doing some things that are really strange to the students. And for myself, I want to collect some evidence that it's effective. But I think also just in case I need that evidence for administration when it comes up, I want to have that evidence for that reason too. And then I just love doing research and collecting evidence and testing my hypotheses and seeing what works and what doesn't. And so in the SOTL process, it just really is very reflective of the research process, right? We have an idea and a context that we need to develop. We want to design and implement the research that we want to look at and collect that data, set up our timeline, do the data analysis, you know, draw our conclusions from that, and then share that in whatever way is appropriate. It could be in this venue in optics, could be at AAPT or PERC, or it could just be with my fellow teachers or some other professional development group. Really to inform my teaching. And one of the easiest ways to do this, as we're all here for, is just pre-post testing, right? Collecting data with instruments that are administered before and after instruction to provide us a measure of growth and learning that occurred. And when we do this, we want to give it to all the students that are available at both time periods. We want to be consistent in our administration procedures. Use ideally these research-based assessments. And I think for two reasons that's important. One is, we've all probably written a test and had a question that was too hard or too easy or just didn't give us any useful information. And these have gone through some extensive testing to show that. And the other is like, part of why we built LASSO, and I'll talk about, is like contributing to this greater knowledge development, this pool of knowledge. And so these research-based assessments, like Chris just talked about on PhysPort, which is a great website for these resources, have gone through extensive qualitative and quantitative analysis, just like the gold star and the silver, bronze levels, right? Interviews, open-ended responses, think aloud protocols, classical test theory, item response theory, differential item function analysis, just extensive testing. Often these are developed with significant amount of funding from like the National Science Foundation. Now, the problem often with these research-based assessments is giving them in class. I just feel a lot of stress about every hour, every 10-minute block of time, like how am I spending that in class, So historically, these have been administered as scantrons in class. When I started grad school, one of the first things I did was to go process years and years of this data that had been collected, but nobody had done anything with. And so, right, there's time to score it if you have scantrons or online, figuring out, these complicated Excel spreadsheets often, or just uploading it to PhysPort, which is, I think, also a great resource that would be good to talk about. And then doing the analysis and interpreting it, having the expertise to know how to interpret that, having context for interpreting that data. And then, this just can lead to a lot of frustration. So this is, and not using these tools that, we really think of as some of the lowest and easiest tools for coming into doing SOTL and reflective practices. So we developed the LASSO platform. And, show the video. Sorry. I'll just show the actual platform. And we'll come back to this. Okay, let me see. And you guys can still see my screen because I never know when I do the slider if it's still showing. Okay, great. So the LASSO platform is a fairly straightforward. We just made it so that these research-based assessments can be administered online. And then we've developed a website to house all of the materials and a separate website to actually interact with everything, the actual RBAs to administer them. And the big difference between PhysPort and LASSO is that LASSO administers these all online, and I'll just demonstrate what that looks like. And if you want, you can administer those online in class if you're worried about students using additional resources to answer them correctly. Or we suggest you just have them take it outside of class. We did a study that was published in the International Journal of STEM Education, and the key difference is actually participation. And if you do it outside of class, you just have to work hard to get the students to do it. I just ran one earlier this semester, and I think I had like 93% of the students take it. And much of that was just due to students coming and going at the beginning of the semester, dropping and adding the course. And so we have guides for how to use LASSO for instructors and for students. We have all the assessments. And so for the instructor help guides, troubleshooting these lessons that we've learned. This is like, I think one of the values of these resources for our communities like PhysPort or LASSO is like kind of all these, here, this is specific to LASSO, but bringing together our knowledge. And this pretty simple process. You add a course, you add an assessment, add the rosters of the students and choose what you want to assess and send it out. And then, right, inevitably resetting one's password. Now, LASSO hosts a wide range of assessments. And we have two kinds of assessments. The static assessment, and those are all like what's listed on PhysPort. They are fixed length. There's 47 items on the FMCE and 30 items on the FCI. And those can be given online or offline. And then we are developing these adaptive assessments, and I'll talk a little bit about that and show some visualizations and how that works. And so we have adaptive assessments that are available on LASSO for physics and math. And then we have a host across all of STEM. And I pulled up the ones in physics. They span from quantum mechanics, conceptual assessment, to the light phenomena, conceptual assessment, all kinds of range. There's also these science general ones, like Lawson's classroom test of scientific reasoning. And these have some information that overlaps with what's on PhysPort, but we haven't put our effort into. And actually, if we open the force concept inventory, it just has a very brief description of what's here. And usually, oh, we haven't updated oh, right here. And a link back to the PhysPort page for more information. So we just have some information and research that's been done on it. But our goal has been more about making it very easy to access and administer than providing the detailed information that's on PhysPort, even if that needs to be updated sometimes. That's a cost of putting all that information there, so it's a lot more to keep up to date. So what that looks like within the platform is in LASSO. You sign in. This is my dashboard. Here it tells me I have these, the number of students I have, the number of courses, the number of assessments, how many have been administered. The only real one is for my course is this mechanics cognitive diagnostic. And then there's a calculus cognitive diagnostic. This is a made up one we're testing with, as you can see. We come in and we create a roster. We can download, add courses. We can download a roster template, copy and paste that. I just copy and pasted it using the tools in Canvas to load that up. Or you can add an individual student. You can indicate if they've dropped. You can delete them completely. Then set up the administrations. Now, a typical research-based assessment is really designed to be either a pre and post assessment or just a post. Like the quantum mechanics conceptual assessment, working with Steve Pollock and adding that, that's just designed to be a post because, you know, students come into quantum, they don't know any of the answers to any of those questions. So there's no reason to waste an hour of their time asking them at the beginning of the semester with the way that instrument's designed. So you can set up the administrations, how many you want to do, set up the timing, and this is our adaptive assessment. And I'll show this in the physics one more. But in here, and I just launched this one, you can go in and select the learning objectives that you want to measure. And I'll talk a bit more about these on the physics one. I'll go over to that in a second. So for our adaptive assessments, you have to pick what you want to measure, set up, and it gives you an estimated time length, number of responses, the number of students who have responded. You set when it's available from and the deadline, send reminders. And I use this feature, it's pretty nice. It's an optional assessment link that I just post in my Canvas and then the students click on it. Let's see what it does if I click. Let's see if I copied and then I have this here. So let's see. If I put it in, it just takes us to the login for the students. So they can log in and set up an account and access their assessment here. And then once we have data, you can download the reports. I don't have a good report to share right now. They're all on my old computer. Okay. One of the advantages, is that really true? Yes. One of the advantages of this is we have 47,000 responses from the force concept inventory from something like 800 courses. So in the reports, when you if you do the force concept inventory and download it, it tells you where your class is compared to all the other classes that have taken the force concept inventory at the beginning and end of instruction. So it really provides quite useful context for interpreting how effective my course was compared to others. And we do that both in terms of the average pre and post test in the class, and the effect size in the class from beginning to end. So there's kind of two measures, two ways of looking at that. And we have similar tools for like the CLAS and for interpreting that data as well. So on these, so what we've really been focused on is developing these cognitive diagnostics. And the big advantage there is they allow measuring multiple learning objectives. And so if I go back to my courses, this is my real course, so I have to be careful that I don't pull up the student roster since we're recording. But here, this is the actual one I ran. So I had 40 out of 47 students respond. The average score, they got 60% correct on it. I ran it on these times. I chose this one to measure 1D. So this is my pre-test. 1D kinematics, 2D kinematics, Newton's second law, Newton's third law, and math, algebra, and math calculus. Because I really wanted this to help me inform where the students starting in my course. This week, I'm running kind of a second assessment to see. We've now covered 1D kinematics. And so I want to see where are they at with 1D kinematics. They have covered vectors. So I asked them to do vectors too to see where they're at with that. And then we are in the middle of doing 2D kinematics or just starting 2D kinematics. So I'll kind of get a sense of where they are at with this and see how much gain they have made. And then in another week or two, I'll ask 2D kinematics as a post and Newton's laws as kind of a pre, just so I can see the learning progression. And we're still working on developing the reports for this, but this is kind of a visualization I threw together to kind of show, right, like that you can see when I start, you know, most students, some students have had prior instruction in physics, but many haven't. But as I teach things, ideally, they are gaining that knowledge, and more of them are gaining those skills. So kind of here across time, they've gained mastery in kinematics and mastery in Newton's laws. And the key thing is, though, I don't actually have to measure all of these things every time, right? Like, I do not want to ask students about kinematics every single week. Ideally, you know, we have just moved on with our curriculum and our instruction. And with this platform and the adaptive assessments, I can focus on other things as they come up, free body diagrams, momentum, energy, kinetic energy. And unfortunately, these are all in alphabetical order, which is not as useful as if they, but I guess people teach in different ways, and energy. And we have, these are the ones that it can currently measure. A couple of other advantages is the item bank is actually changing. It's a living thing, unlike the force concept inventory that has not changed in 27 years. We are constantly testing, adding items, changing the items, and working to add additional learning objectives. And that is a thing that like anyone can contribute that's interested in doing that work. Writing questions, adding questions potentially to test them. And we have a rigorous process for adding a new item where we have a test item bank. Items go in the test item bank, and then they get added at the end of students' assessments so that we collect enough data to be able to run our quantitative analysis on, so that we can show that they actually do measure that learning objective that we care about and that they measure it well. And lastly, I think this is just what it looks like for a student. Whether it's a fixed length or our adaptive assessment, they get one item at a time. On the fixed length assessments, they can go back and forth. This is an adaptive assessment. So it's actually the answers to these questions actually determine what the next question is. So they can't change their answers. So I'll just like, if I answer a bunch of questions wrong, it will just ask me easier and easier questions. And I'm not even choosing anything here. And I can just finish this and then we can look at how poorly I did. See how long it takes. I think I had 2 learning objectives, so it should ask 6 to 12 questions. Let's see if this is the last one. Yes, perfect. Next. And then the last thing is like, as an instructor, when you create your course, you give consent to sharing the data. And then each student who completes it, they opt into sharing their data or not. And so that goes into, like I was saying, we have 47,000 force concept inventory tests that have been completed where students have consented to share that data. And we ourselves are using that for research, and then we have other colleagues who are using it at MIT and at Rowan and at Michigan State. And then that just gets submitted. There's demographic questions that they can choose to answer. These are separated from the taking of the test. They only get asked these if they consent to share their data, to distinguish like the research activities from the normal classroom activities. This auto-filled with just my answers, whatever I randomly chose before, just to test it out. And these can be updated, changed through multiple selection. And then, great. I can go back, and it's a little tricky because I have to use two different browsers to like log in as an instructor and log in as a student. But when I come back, I can go to my courses. And I can go to my roster here. Oh, it's loading. Let's see what happens. Just do a full refresh. There we go. And see, now it's checked green, so it's indicated that I have completed it. For this one, I can download the data and look at it, and it'll show what skills I have or have not mastered, and then my overall performance. And we're working on building the reports for these so that they provide context to make it easy to interpret and useful for instructors. Does anybody have questions? I want to just leave lots of time for questions. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Can I ask a quick one? I think I dozed off for a second. What was the difference between fixed length and adaptive test? I think you must have said it, but I missed it.
Yeah, so a fixed length question, like the force concept inventory, has 30 items, and pretty much it just measures like overall Newtonian thinking. Now the FMC has, and this is very rarely used, actually like sub-concepts on it that Trevor and Michael Whitman, I forgot Trevor's last name, developed. And there's like a Excel spreadsheet, but I do not know how many people have access to that or use it. That makes a nice visualization. The cognitive diagnostic draws from an item bank. And then the instructor or the researcher sets what learning objectives they want to measure. And that could be one learning objective, and those are measured by between 3 and 6 items. We ran simulation studies and found that 3 items is usually sufficient to get a good measure of one of these learning objectives. And around, and so that can be structured up to including, many learning objectives, so that it could be a short quiz with just 1 or 2 learning objectives, or it can be like equivalent to or more expansive than the force concept inventory. And you have a lot of flexibility. Now, within that process, every time a student answers a question, it updates the estimate of what that student's ability and skill mastery is. And then it asks the question that has the maximum information based on those estimates. So it's very efficient. Whereas the force concept inventory requires, or has, it doesn't require, has 30 items to estimate students' ability at.
And where are those items coming from? The ones on the adaptive?
Yeah, so they are coming from research instruments that are on, like the force concept inventory and force and motion conceptual evaluation, other items that we've developed to fill in the gaps in what exists on there.
Okay. So, but also, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize the talk here, but I noticed that you said you could have, you selected a few objectives at the beginning of the semester, and then 2 weeks later you decided to test them on vectors. So you can do that sort of thing where you only do an assessment, even though you didn't do it on day 1. So you don't have to do the same assessment later into the semester than you did at the beginning.
Right, absolutely. You have total flexibility with what learning objectives are measured and when. I gotta not double click. Yeah, so if I go in here under the administrations, And I set this up to have 6, but I can change this to any number. It just, they just add up down here. And so I can go in and say my third one, this is probably going to be after kinematics. So let's see if I can ask like, okay, let's see if they've mastered kinematics. And then another good one would be free fall, like an easier example. But they have not yet gotten to so I can see, because a lot of the students in the course I'm teaching have actually had physics before. So it's nice for me to know, like, okay, a third of the students actually know how to do free body diagrams, or they know how to do Newton's second law. And that way also, it doesn't let me take credit for like what they already came in knowing. But this, for my goals, would actually, and I can submit and it'll, oh, this won't tell us because we have to. Right now, this doesn't work, but if we're fixing it, we just broke it. It'll normally give a length. And we kind of estimate 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes per learning objective. And so if I asked this right now, I have 5 of these on here. So this potentially 25 to 50 minutes is way more than I would want to ask, right? So I would probably just cut, like, because that's going to overlap, maybe free fall. And I would just ask these 3 questions and see where the students are before we start doing Newtonian. And then I would ask kind of some overlapping Newtonian, second law, third law, and maybe some energy questions before we start. So I'm getting this pulse of like, where are they before and after instruction every week or 2. And it doesn't have to be used that way. You can set it up to be like a monthly, like before the test, as feedback to the students, like where are they at? It's very flexible.
But also very specific, as I can see. You have a breakdown of lots of topics, whereas the FCI is just like 2 or they're like 4 or 5 different categories, and that's it. Whereas this
Yeah,
one,
yeah, and we yes, and we have a paper where we're using a different cognitive diagnostic model of skills. And we shifted to this just as instructors, as we got feedback from instructors, finding like this specificity more valuable. And that's something we're kind of moving around, is like, what level of specificity in the skills is actually like useful for instructors? Because 1D kinematics obviously includes free fall. And so at what point is it like too specific or not specific enough? And everybody's needs are going to kind of vary. So trying to figure that out. With our calculus ones too, like a big advantage is, and even here, right, we have this math content. And like, for me, it's really valuable to know like what math skills and knowledge are the students coming in with. But kind of as the semester goes on, that's not as valuable for me to figure out, right? Like, and I used it to do my groups. I literally just downloaded their things and then I sorted it so they had a variety of skills before coming into the class. So variety of exposure to physics. That way, and my reasoning was just, I didn't have a group of the students who all got like 5s on the AP test and they do the activity and then they just sit there and get frustrated and waiting. But I actually did a lit review on this, and there is not a good answer of how you should structure groups around prior knowledge. So.
I'm also guessing that that fits well with you. You mentioned your grading. What was it that you said you were using? Ungrade. No, how was it called again? Ungrading.
Oh, I'm using standards-based grading in my course. I'm making the mistake of trying something new. You know?
No, it was that's what the word I was looking for, standard based. So you can customize it to say, well, you're good at doing free body diagram and not so much at doing the 2D kinematics, and so so they can get more specific feedback on where they need to. And I think for preparation for a test, that would be really useful for students.
Yeah. And that's something we haven't implemented yet, but is on our block, which is that instructors could turn on reports going to the students. So like they would get a report of what skills they've mastered, how well they're doing.
Yeah.
We're in the process of making the reports for the instructors, partly because like it's a complicated report where it's like very dynamic with, many different skills and seeing exactly how do we make those visualizations and tables so they're useful and still adaptive to like all the choices instructors have. But you don't have to use the cognitive diagnostic with LASSO. You can just give the force concept inventory.
Well, actually, I find this more interesting because it's, you know, more detailed and more, I don't know, more precise, or I don't know, maybe just because it's different, but still.
Well, I think there's, you know, I have a question, like with the force concept inventory, we give it as a pre and a post, but, you know, the last 2/3 of the course haven't been about the material on the force concept inventory, right? Or however it gets divvied up. And so partly there's like so much less research on even like rotational kinematics or all of that stuff that's not covered by the force concept inventory, just because it's not covered by the force concept inventory. So it would be nice just to have, yeah, more flexibility, more options. And at this scale, like we are able to add probably 20, like a force concept inventory worth of items every semester. And as we get more and more users, we'll be able to add items even quicker and build out across all those skills. So yeah, our next goal is to build it out across, well, we're working on building out across all of mechanics and then build it out across all of E&M. We have one we're developing for calculus, and then to break that down through the whole curriculum of math in K-12 and higher ed up to Calc 3. Like,
Are you going to have AI generated questions?
it's actually a question, because I don't know if you all have been using ChatGPT, but GPT-5 is like even more powerful than like 4.5 was. And I was curious, not just if it could generate good questions, because I've been using it and I think it generates reasonable questions, but if it could generate questions when I asked it for like easy, medium, and hard questions, if it could do that well,
Okay.
which I have no idea, but it'd be easy to test.
Yeah.
I proposed it to my colleagues to test that out the other day.
Okay.
I have a couple questions, Jason.
Yeah.
The first one, you know, since many, if not most of the people who are here today are two-year college people, we know that like 60% or 65% of all two-year college people are single-person departments. They're the only person teaching. Will is agreeing with me there. So they often are able to adapt things like this a little more easily because they don't have to convince a department that, hey, we should be doing this. But for those who are part of multi-person departments, do you have any recommendations for helping faculty get department buy-in for using instruments like this?
I wish I had a better answer, because I am trying to figure this out myself as new faculty at Montana State University. I think, and partly, you know, my own model of doing it is actually just to show that like what I'm doing is effective. Hopefully, fingers crossed. You know, I am trying to base it as much as I can on the literature. And then like use that to create conversations with colleagues that are not like belittling or preaching, but just like, oh yeah, this is what I was doing, and like this is how I checked to see how effective it was. And I think though there's like a lot of similarity with like the learning assistant model, where I have done a lot more work with supporting people and expanding, right? And part of it is just like doing the thing ourselves if we can and showing how it's effective and why. And that actually goes back to, I think, is it pronounced Kareem? Question is like why we developed or kind of had the idea of developing the cognitive diagnostic is it's just so distant from instruction, right? Like I do the post test and I see how well I did, and then maybe I use it to reflect on the next semester, as opposed to it's giving me another perspective on all this evidence I'm collecting on how well our students learning or not learning. And we have like, we're working on a paper, and I'll throw the calculus instructors under the bus here since we're all physicists. And we're looking at this data from physics. But let me see if I can pull it up really quick. But the data in calculus is depressing. Like I would not, let's see, where do I have it at?
It's even worse when you do algebra.
I mean, yes, actually, we could talk about that here. Let me see if I can pull up this paper. And this is just something that we're submitting today, actually, for Room. And I'll pull up the Sankey plot. Let's see here. Yeah, so this is actually kind of like one of the ways you can visualize. And so these are like the skills. So this is the pre-calculus assessment, and it measures 4 skills, right? And so these are the students who have no mastery of any of the skills before instruction, and then no mastery after. And what's like, very depressing here is the proportion of everyone having all mastery, it's pretty stagnant, right? Like these are the same size. Like there's really not any change. The only change here is that some students are gaining, and this is actually in skills with limits. So they must be in courses where they actually learned about limits. This is the calculus concept inventory, and we can see like there is an increase in the number of students who have some skills, but the vast majority of students are leaving these courses not having mastered the prerequisites for the courses. So,
What do the mathematicians say about that?
well, we're gonna find out in February. We go present the talk to them. I'm sure they will say the common thing, which is like to throw the instrument under the bus. Oh, those are just bad instruments.
Well, my
But-
second question, that's really interesting. I'm reminded of some work that I did with a calculus professor at my institution, where we realized there was not a lot of transfer going on, and what could we do in both of our courses to help increase that transfer. So your results remind me very much of that work that we were doing. So the other question I have is there a need in the use of these kinds of instruments for instructors to get things like IRB approval or something like that from their institution if they want to offer these to their students? And are those concerns or requirements different if you're only using them to inform your own instruction versus submitting them to a conglomerate database similar to like what you have or what PhysPort has, where it's bringing all the data together from many, many institutions and many courses?
Yeah, well, there's many different answers. And the only real answer is like you just have to talk to your administrators at your institutions to get the right answer to the questions. But in reality, like if you're using this for normal classroom activities and not for research, there's no IRB involved. Right. It's just like giving the force concept inventory in your class. If it's not for research, it's not for research. For FERPA, you should talk to your department head or someone to make sure that it's okay to collect the data in this way. And we haven't had any issues with that come up where people say they can't, but I don't know why they would talk to us if they've been told they can't use our platform. So it's a known unknown for us. But we worked with Iowa State University's legal to ensure all of LASSO is compliant with FERPA. And so that's a part of like the instructor has to agree to share the data with researchers. Each student has to agree to share the data with researchers. The collection of consent is done after the assessment is given, because to separate that process from the normal classroom activities. And similarly, we're collecting the I disagree with this, but we're collecting demographic data primarily for research purposes. So we want to collect that also separately from the collecting the information.
Thank you, because that's useful information for instructors who might want to be using something like this, so that they can let their administrators know that there is a separation. So
yeah, and for PhysPort, it works slightly differently because it anonymizes all the data that's uploaded. And I don't know if they've made this better, but it actually makes it quite a pain with like matching and student misspelling names and issues like that. And so that's one advantage of LASSO is like there's no worrying about matching pre and post data. And all of the data that's collected with LASSO can be uploaded to PhysPort. We actually made sure that the format of the downloads works with uploading it to PhysPort pretty easily. That was at least true many years ago. I don't know if anything has changed on PhysPort. But so all of their data is anonymized before it's ever stored. So it's not FERPA. FERPA doesn't apply to anonymized data. But you have to check all those things with your leadership at your institution, because I am neither a lawyer nor your boss.
Do we have other questions for Jason?
And I would just say, like, I was really excited to talk to you all too, because I mean, two-year colleges are so underrepresented in the research, and we have a handful that use LASSO, and it's always nice to see that, like, we can report that, like, when we do a study, that two-year colleges are there, and we definitely want to make sure that, like, these adaptive assessments we're developing are meeting everyone's needs and getting feedback from everyone.
So how many institutions are currently LASSO? Do you know, or is it a large number? Don't have to be precise.
There have been like around 237 different institutions that have used LASSO. And there's, I don't know, like this semester, because it's kind of, schools are coming and going, but we're over 100 courses that are running right now, collecting data with LASSO.
And I'm assuming the best place to start would be on the website, and all the information would be in there.
Yeah, like I was sharing, the website has all the help documentation for getting started. And then it also has like a little help button that'll send an email to, you can always email me or Ben Van Dusen. Someday, LASSO will bring in money and then we'll be able to hire somebody magically, but probably never.
You're
So
an optimist, huh?
until then. And fortunately, like, as we find, not necessarily things that are bugs, but things that are like kind of confusing, user design, we do have the resources. We've been like kind of ironing out all of those wrinkles so that it is, like, we've implemented automated reminders because we did research and found that, like, just sending email reminders is very valuable for getting students to actually do a thing. And so that's set up automatically, so you don't have to think about it unless you don't want to do it.
Any other questions or comments or anything for our facilitator?
So just wondering, since you can, especially with the adaptive thing, since you can modify the questions depending on what your objective might be. So from one semester to another, how would you kind of compare semesters, let's say, in terms of how efficient one semester was compared to the other?
Oh, yeah. So it measures two things that comes out of the adaptive test. It measures the student's overall performance, and it's using item response theory. So it's like a Z-score. It's just a Z-score. And it has both the estimate for what that value is and the uncertainty in that estimate. That's actually when the test stops. One of the stopping criteria is when that uncertainty gets small enough. So it'll ask students, and you don't have to ask the exact same questions to get an estimate of that same levels of ability. And so that's why we don't need to ask. That's like how the GRE and probably the SAT, I don't know for sure, and the ASVAB, like all these computer adaptive tests have huge item banks that cycle in and out of questions.
Yeah, but I was thinking even in terms of the categories that you set up for the testing, you'd say one semester I'm going to focus on this particular set of ideas for the course. And then next semester, I'll focus more on one thing or another based on whatever happens.
Yeah, so that's two different things. So then you would still have the skills, like have they mastered 2D kinematics? And those could be like you'd have to be careful if you wanted to make those direct comparisons about the skills of when and my plan is just to make sure my pre and my post look fairly similar. Like I want to ask, more about momentum and hopefully angular momentum on the post, but I'll make sure that it covers some of the same FCI topics to see where the students are. But it still gives that overall ability, same as like the FCI overall score is estimating. So even if you ask different questions, it will still have like overall mechanics ability across these different constructs. Yep.
And do you use the whatever measurements, I mean, the results you get, for instance, to design an upcoming test based on that? You say, well, I'd like to, you know, because you can get a sense of, well, they've understood this pretty well. Maybe I don't need to test them on that. Maybe I should focus on something else.
No, I think I think so. I mean, partly I aspire to, but
Mhm.
right now I am just trying to survive, like teaching this course for the first time. I think Friday.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, and because I just started here in January,
Oh, okay. So,
and I have it's been like 12 years since I really did a lot of physics, besides like designing, research, and instrumentation. Since I did a lot of vectors and calculus, it's been a while.
mhm.
But so partly, I'm just seeing like, what is it like to use this? How do I find it useful? And in my own critique of it is like because I'm kind of doing a fairly weekly quiz for these standards. And so there's like a lot of overlap with what LASSO is providing. And I'm trying to see where is that value, and maybe like pre-testing is actually more useful to like collect that data. And I have a learning assistant in my course, and we could sit down and look at it. And
Mhm.
those are all things I hope to do next year when I'm not putting together homework sets that I think are reasonably good and answer keys that the grader doesn't hate me. Uh,
Mhm.
um, but I think there's a ton of different ways it could be used. Um,
Yeah, because it provides a really good diagnostic from one semester to the next. You can customize things pretty well.
yeah, and I really would like to. I really want. I'm looking forward to us having this automated where I would like to do like the pre-test for the students, like do this by Wednesday or Tuesday, the test is on Friday. Get that back, like, oh, you don't know any vectors. Like for whatever reason, you think you know vectors, but you do not know any vectors. Like study vectors.
Yeah, that'd be, yeah.
Especially with like we've found that just asking 3 multiple choice questions, and often multiple choice questions can answer like multiple learning objectives. So it can just take not very many good questions to get a really robust measure of where students are at.
Well, that was very, very informative. Thank you.
No, thank you very much.